Hello, everybody. How are you? Jacoby here from Ukraine, and I wanted to do a video update here. And normally I would feel really rushed with these or try to do something short and sweet or fast. But this is going to be kind of just a no-frills video. If you need on YouTube, it allows you to speed up the video to make it faster. I just don't want to put any additional pressure on myself because I really want to just relax here and share from my heart because we have some serious things going on, and I realize that most people won't be able to watch this whole thing, but I would really appreciate it if you just gave me a few minutes to listen, because I have some heavy things in my heart and we really need some prayer, and I thought it was time to get a real update out. Not that other updates aren't real, but this is going to be a very maybe different one, a very strange, you could say, not a very usual missionary update at all. I have some things in my heart that have been weighing me down for quite a while, for several months. I don't think depression is the word, but definitely uninspired, unmotivated. I'm still doing things. I'm still staying busy for the most part. But before, I was kind of a machine. I was an unstoppable machine. I was always working on multiple ministry tasks. Everyone around me was telling me that I was doing too much to slow down, but I still found a way to juggle it. Sometimes at the expense of my own sanity, or make myself a little over anxious. But lately I've relaxed quite a bit, and a lot of that is just from discouragement, trying to find a way to reset. And so I want to share a little bit of that about what's going on there. Now, people say, people that train missionaries on how to, how to adapt to cultures on the field, and how to write updates, how to raise support, all the things that are involved with the missionary life. They say that, when you write an update, an email, that you don't say everything. You got to really cherry pick about what you share. So there's an element to missions that becomes kind of like marketing, which I really don't like, because I'm kind of a no filter. Naturally, my personality is no filter. I say things how I see that they are. And that's actually one of the reasons why I don't believe I'm called to be a pastor, because pastors are very restricted in what they can and can't say. Also, there's a lot of pressure on being a model in every way. And, I'm not a terrible person, but I'm definitely not perfect. I definitely have, my quirks and my issues and my struggles. Could possibly be a pastor, but I just don't like the pressure of it. I once had a friend who I asked him if he thought I was called to be a pastor. This was after years of training to be a pastor. Or my whole idea was, there's a book from Calvary Chapel. It's called Second, and it's about the guy who was second to Chuck Smith. And I always liked that book, because this guy wasn't seeking a pedestal, he was seeking to serve. And so my whole idea was to find my place in ministry where I could serve, where I could help a head pastor or help the ministry that was there, and give it everything I have without seeking any recognition. That's another thing I don't like about missionary updates, or I don't even like Facebook. I don't want Facebook at all. I want to turn it off. I don't like their policies. I don't like the platform, but I'm forced to keep it because it's the best way, Facebook and Instagram, for us to communicate with people back home about our missions. Of course, you have email, but like 15% of people each month even open the email. So there's like this marketing aspect to missions, and then you have people you're ministering to, and it's like, hey, I'm ministering to this person, let me take your picture and post it because people are praying for us or sending us money. And it's like, that can get awkward, or even it's kind of like you're using the people for that. So it kind of gets tiring. After a while, you don't want to take pictures of all your ministry. It just feels fake. It's like I'm doing this so I can post something or tell people about it. And of course, people back home, they want to know what's going on. If they're supporting you in prayer, if they're supporting you financially, they like to see some productivity. So there's kind of a balance there, and the whole thing becomes a kind of an art or like a juggling act. I don't know. But after a while, we've been missionaries 9 years now. You get to a point where you're just like, I just want to do missions without having to post about it all the time. I just want to serve these people because they're people, or I don't feel like just telling all the good stuff that's happening, or trying to spin stuff to make it look like God's doing more than he is, or something like that. Not that God's not working. We all know that God is always working, but if we don't always see the immediate fruits or the results right in front of us. And so sometimes missions, not just missions, but any ministry just requires patience and commitment and stick-to-itiveness in the times when things aren't going the way that you would like. So, I used to put a lot of thought into my missionary updates. First few years or more, I would spend 2-3 hours on them, picking out the pictures, what I was going to say, try to make them entertaining or edifying. And basically, over the years, sometimes I would get an encouraging note or two, mostly from the same 2 or 3 people. But without fail, every month there'd be 2 or 3 unsubscribe. And I know that I'm supposed to set up my MailChimp account so that I don't see those unsubscribes, so that I don't get discouraged. But I couldn't bring myself to do that. For some reason, I wanted to know who was unsubscribing, and it would always discourage me. But that's how it is. So it gets, over the years, it gets harder and harder to put all this effort into these updates when you get 0 response and you just get a few unsubscribes every month. So anyway, like I said, I've been struggling with kind of a depression, but it's not like a sadness depression. It's more like just, I don't know, in the doldrums, I guess. So I just kind of want to, start back to where I think all this is stemming from, because I feel like I just need to put my heart out there. Don't feel like there's definitely people in my life I can talk to, but I just have this question, like, I know what they're going to say. I know what I would say to someone in my shoes, and I'm just kind of throwing out a SOS for kind of a lifeline. I need some kind of insight or wisdom or encouragement from somebody. I don't know exactly, but it was just on my heart to share this. I actually spent an hour or 2 yesterday. I wrote a 13-page update, knowing that very few people would actually read the whole thing. And I shared a lot of things in there that have led to this season of discouragement, ways that people have hurt me or let me down, or friends that haven't been good friends, or maybe even haven't acted like Christians, you could say. I feel somewhat quasi-traumatized by things that we went through as missionaries. And we've continued to go through an unbelievable amount of resistance. God's continued to provide, and we continue to work and try and to focus on hope. But, well, anyways, now before I go into this, let me make it clear, there's good things happening. There's people whose lives are being touched or being ministered to. There's seeds being planted. There's definitely differences being made. But on this video, I just want to focus on the hard stuff. So if you could put on some thick skin. I don't bring anyone else down. That's not my goal here. And my goal, like I said, I wrote a 13-page thing, and I listed like all of this different stuff that churches have done or people have done. because I have a lot of bitterness. I'm not going to lie. And I even went to counseling for this when we're in the States. I really, really want to get rid of the bitterness, but I know scripturally, what you're supposed to do. I know theoretically that I should forgive, even if people don't ask for forgiveness, or even if people don't realize they hurt you. But, I want to not just know what I'm supposed to do or know in theory, but actually be able to do it. And it's very difficult when it's dozens and dozens of people. And it kind of start to feel like, almost like, am I even a Christian? I'm trying to give my life to serve God the best I can, however imperfect that is. I'm giving it everything. But then you go through this landslides of false promises or people coming at you with weird perceptions, saying very strange and hurtful things. Friends that you thought were friends are just attacking you for being a missionary. It's and then I see all these other missionaries on social media. They post their things, and the people are like swooning over them. It's like they're a celebrity or something because they're a missionary. And I get, some likes on my posts or something, but they're mostly from Ukrainians. Like, the Americans don't even care. And we really try to reach out to some specific churches, but because we needed encouragement, we needed support, we needed Christians behind us. But long story short, they left us in the cold, and that's not really an exaggeration. They just completely dogged us out. Like, there are churches that support us, and we're very thankful for them. But like I said, right now I'm just focusing on the hard stuff in this update because I need prayer. I'm very discouraged. So I'm trying to find a way to forgive people. I thought if I explained, because I'll tell you kind of what's going on in here, but I have to leave it vague. I can't gossip about people. I can't name names. I can't, even if I go through everything that's happened, it'll just sound like me vomiting out all my bitterness. And I guess my reason behind it was, well, if I tell people, it doesn't help. It just, I've talked to people, I've talked to counselors, it just hasn't helped anything. And if I confront the people one-on-one, often they just ignore me. Even had a couple of people block me because I confronted them about promises they made or things they did that are hurtful. Or even when I try to reconcile with somebody for some conflict, it's always one-sided. Like, I'm given 100% to try to reconcile, and they're giving back like 30, if that. And they never took the initiative ever. I've almost never in my life, in my Christian life, had a Christian come to me to reconcile. Now that I say that, I remember 2 people. 2. That's, I don't know. To me, forgiveness and reconciliation is like the central thing in the gospel. If Christians can't figure out how to do that, and the odd thing is people are treating me like I'm not a part of the family or something. Like, we go to people for help, to get behind us in serving God and spreading the gospel, and I feel like that, like they're all in this club, this social Christian club, and I'm not in it, and nobody's telling me. I just kind of got to figure that out on my own or something. So I don't know. So I can't tell everything, but my reason behind it was, if I went to the people one-on-one and told them about it, how they hurt me or whatever, or what happened, it just seems like it's not going to be productive. But if I shared the landslide of different things, I mean, it was unreal. The only way for me to, I'm trying to process it. Like, how could it happen? So many people, so many things go wrong, or so many people hurt you, or so many people turn on you. Like, it's either, like I said, I'm not a Christian, and they all are, but that seems weird because they're all spread out over different cities and states, or this is spiritual warfare, which is at the top of my list, or people just don't like me. They don't like the way I look. So I guess that's fine. I mean, it's fine, but it's not fine. Maybe that's just the way it is. They don't like the way I look, or they don't like the way I carry myself or my personality. I'm not, I guess, your typical cookie cutter Christian, but there is a lot of people out there like me who do just fine in Christian land. So I don't know. It could also be the fact that a couple times in my life I've changed denominations. So I don't know. And then sometimes people will say, oh, well, I can't support you because you're not in my denomination. And then later on you are in their denomination and they're like, it's crickets. So most of the people that support our ministry are not in our denomination. They just believe in the gospel. They believe in what we're doing. They felt led by God to give. I personally don't like the word felt led. I've seen it abused so many times, and it's very subjective. I think if God has his hand in a mission, he has his hand in a mission, and that doesn't change unless the person does, some heinous sin or something that ruins their marriage or ruins their ministry. So anyway, I just don't think God's schizophrenic. He doesn't lead people, most people give on emotion. It's all emotion. It's not thought through, how is this money being stewarded from me and through the hands it's going to, with serious gospel considerations in mind. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I'm just saying most people naturally just give and act on emotion, including myself. And I think of myself as a very rational, logical person. But we are all far more emotionally led than we realize. So I don't like the word feeling led by God to give. I like the word, I believe God would have me give. It might even be sacrificially. You might feel nothing in it, but it's a choice and it's worship, and God loves that. So let's see here. Where was I at? I have a few bullet points here. Okay, so I'll just go back real quick, recap. We became missionaries about 9 years ago. Lyd and I got married, and then we went through 4 months of intensive missionary training here in Odessa. So with an organization out of Montana, and we really got a lot out of that. I really appreciated the Kairos course. It's like a condensed version of the Perspectives course, which is a missions course, and I recommend that to everyone because I had mission courses before, but when I went through this, my eyes were really open to the thread of missions and God's heart for the nations throughout the whole Bible, from beginning to end. And can't say everyone will have the same experience, but I think it's very important for churches to be missions oriented and to teach their people to think missionally in that way. But so we went through that training, and then immediately after I went to the States to raise a missionary support. And within 3 months, it was almost a miracle. We had them out, and it was only like $2,000 a month, give or take. Some months a little less, some months a little more. And so for a few years, with that supplemented with my fishing money, every year I would go fishing for 2 or 3 months. Financially things were quite good until later on we had to go to the States. So going back, we ended up leaving the first church. After missionary training, we decided to serve in Odessa. We both had a heart to spread the gospel here. We saw the need here. And so that's what we did. We started doing English club with the church. And then the pastors there, all great Christian guys, but they all had a different theology. And my personal conviction was that elders in a church shouldn't be serving in the same church if they have completely different views on certain theological stances. They disagreed. They thought it could be more ecumenical kind of, elders aren't going to agree on everything, but there's certain fundamental, serious things they should be agreeing on, or at least working towards that. And I was just trying to encourage that we try to have conversations to work towards that. They weren't going for it, thought I was trying to control things, which I wasn't. I wasn't trying to control anything. I was just trying to do what I was taught is what churches are supposed to do. That's it. And that was very, very difficult when we left that church. Very hard. We couldn't find a church, didn't know where to go next. In Odessa, we actually started our own Bible study for a while. We didn't know what ministry we were going to do now. We started doing an English club for orphans. We started visiting people on the street that lived down in the basements of buildings and stuff. And it's actually still our heart to do ministry for those people, and hope to get back to that someday. But more on that in a little bit. Anyway, so we ended up, I got introduced to this MTW missionary, a couple of missionaries somebody told me about, and they told me about a church, a Presbyterian church, which we visited. And long story short, we became members there, and we've been there ever since. And this church really needed an outreach. And so we filled that gap. We came in, and we went around to all the other missionaries that went to that church, and we asked them to be involved. We explained this big vision we have. Well, first I actually visited this other church, and I told them, look, I've been doing English clubs, studying English clubs, because when I would prepare these presentations and these whole games and activities and everything, it was quite detailed. It was a lot of work. I was trying to put on, quite the entertaining little thing for people that was informative and engaging. And so I went to this church telling the guy, and he was like, it's an English club. People will be excited for a couple of weeks. And I've seen these before, but tried to tell him this was different, but he didn't listen. And anyways, this pastor is where all Campus Crusade takes all their young new converts. And so I started hanging out with Campus, trying to see what they're all about. And after I talked with this pastor for like 5 days, I was like, okay, something's not right here. Because he was reading some Christian books from some real solid teachers, but also had a couple of weird things would come out of his mouth. Like, truth is just a story. We all live before God. Or he would say that Catholics or Orthodox were okay. And he didn't like doctriners, is what he said. And he didn't like... he didn't believe truth was in propositional statements. It's like experiential, which is kind of like an Eastern Orthodox thing. So I was like, what's going on here? I was like, do you believe in hell? He's like, yeah, I believe in hell. And like, can you tell me what the gospel is? I was trying to put my finger on something was off. And he started getting angry with me. And all I was trying to do was figure out if this was a church I could serve at. So I told him, well, can you tell me what theologian out of all theologians that you recommend, or that you most see yourself in line with, then I can just go read him and I can leave you alone. So he said Stanley Grenz, who I'd never heard of. I Googled it. Come to find out, several well-known evangelical people said that he's crossed the line into non-evangelicalism. He had some views on the Trinity and truth, some kind of postmodern Christianity. And he was highly influential on Rob Bell and the emergent church movement. So this raised a big red flag for me. So then I tried to talk to Campus Crusade leaders. So I'd gone on a hiking trip with them, and they'd become my friends, and I tried to tell them this isn't good. But see, Stanley Grenz is like a theological genius. His ideas are very convoluted, but it trickles down through the pastor's teaching, but it's very gray, it's very smoky. And your average person, a lot of these Campus Crusade leaders don't have a Bible college education. They'd even tell me that. Well, some of them haven't even read the whole Bible. So I said, okay, well, maybe this guy is a Christian, but it's like you're taking all these young people to eat at McDonald's when you could give them a home-cooked meal. You can't eat at McDonald's every night. Kids will be malnourished. So I said, maybe he's a Christian, maybe, but it's an unhealthy church. So I had just left a church from theological convictions. Now I'm criticizing this other church, and the other church from the missions agency I'm with, they're actually connected to that church in a, it's not a denomination, but it's a network of evangelical churches in Ukraine. And then the other church that's connected with them in the city, they're just teaching weird stuff. It's like, I won't go into that, but so I couldn't go serve there. I even tried to contact that pastor and talk with him, but he completely blew me off. So then that missions agency, I'm talking with the vice president. He says, well, maybe you should leave, and we've prayed about it. You should leave and find a missions agency that's in line with your convictions, because we can't see you working with anyone there in the city. And this was after he had told me that me continuing with them and doing what I believe God was calling me to do, and that was to start a center, an outreach rec center in the city. He was all for it, but then the board decided no, probably because I left the first church and they all knew Mark, the leader. So So, so here I am, leaving the church, can't find a church, pretty discouraged. We meet the new people, we start going to this new Presbyterian church, and I had visited a friend in the States who I knew from high school, Christian guy, and him and a buddy had started a nonprofit in Oregon, where I'm from. And they were all excited. We met for lunch and told me they would take us on as missionaries. They said they would even try to send teams over on mission trips. This was a new nonprofit they started, and what they would do is go into high schools and bring pizza to the kids for lunch, and they'd have speakers come in. They do sports like stuff with cheerleaders and basketball and football. They'd have Christian coaches do stuff to reach kids for Christ. So that was their thing. And I said, well, my vision is to do a rec center, so it kind of fits in with what you're doing. The only thing was we were abroad, and they were focusing local. That was their whole thing, it was local ministry. But they made an exception for us. So I was like, cool, we don't have to start our own nonprofit or find a missions agency. We can go through you, do all our payments, blah, blah, blah. They even said that their wives could help. This isn't an attack on their wives or anything, but just long story short, we were with them for two or 3 years. I think 2. But it was a complete mess. The communication was terrible, unorganized. Once we got back to Ukraine, we would rarely get our monthly donations on time. Sometimes it would come and it would be half of it, and we weren't told why. And I would send the guy emails with 3-4 sentences trying to communicate, and he'd send me back 1 half sentence or 2 half sentences, not even answering my questions. And then he'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, I could send half now, and in 2 days I send the other half. And it's like, wait a second, we had donors that sent us money that we need to pay rent every month. And so it got really weird, and it got really tiring after 2 years of that kind of thing. And then it came to where few donors started asking about their annual giving reports for their taxes, and they weren't sending them out. And I was like, I got to get in their system somehow and figure out a way to do it myself. And I was like, so that was a huge thing. And I was like, I don't know what to do. After several attempts to talk with them, I said, well, am I supposed to sue you guys or something? I couldn't possibly really sue them. I didn't want to. They were Christian brothers. But I just didn't know how to get them moving to do something that they're supposed to do. And so, long story short, we did end up starting our own nonprofit after I called 5 or 6 different ones, and they all said, yeah, you can join our missions agency, but you have to basically come and do what we tell you to do. It's like, I don't have a problem serving. I don't have a problem, going and doing what people tell me to do. It'd probably be helpful than being alone like we are. It'd be very helpful to have a missions team. But we had a vision here to do this center. And if I join someone else, they're not just going to give me the freedom to come and do that. And so I was stuck on that vision. So we started our own nonprofit so we'd have the freedom to do that. But we did it in high hopes that we'd be able to build a team, that God would bring us people to help on the mission field and stuff. And that has not happened, not even close. But so that was 2016, early or late 2015, I think. Let's jump back. After we started the ministry here, we went around to the missionaries, asked them to help, and they're kind of like, well, I kind of want to reach the college kids, and we're like, that's what we're doing. So we said, okay. We tried to be resourceful, and we asked one missionary a week to come as a guest to our English club. So for a long time, that's what we did for a whole semester. Once a week, we'd ask a different one. We kind of rotate, so one would come every 5 or 6 weeks or something. And then it started growing. Then between semesters, we got other missionaries, our other missionary friends, to go and help us hand out flyers and give out cold drinks on the first week of a university outside 5 different campuses. And after that, we had I think 88 people come in. We couldn't even fit in our normal room. We had to go back. We had to go out to the foyer. And then the next week, we just moved right into the sanctuary and moved out all the benches and put tables. It was the only room in the church big enough. And from then on, it was just booming. It was like 80 people, 100 people, 120 people. We had to bring in more tables and stuff. And then finally, on our last English club before we went back to the States, we had to go in a room downstairs because they were using the sanctuary for something. And people couldn't even fit in there. They were literally spilling out the door into the hallway to come to our English club. It just blew up, and it was awesome. And we were like, well, we could just stay here, but we had this vision for the center. So we thought, let's go to the States. Everything's going great. We'll sacrifice a little time. We'll go cast our vision, raise support, come back. And the plan was to be able to start a center. So everything was going awesome, like too well. It was so cool. We'd made great new Christian friends. They were all excited and serving in the English club. So we got back to the States, and I got a fishing job with this guy I'd never worked for. Long story short, that ended up being a total mess. Was making like no money, and the guy ended up being a total jerk. So I just quit. I was like, I'm not gonna work for someone that talks to me this way. So we just quit. We left. And then we were in the States. So we had to, pay a lot of money for Leota's visa and to move to the States, hoping this fishing job would get us, set up. And it didn't. But I called my old skipper and I went salmon fishing. So that helped a little bit. It gave us money for me to make a down payment on a car, which ended up being my whole livelihood while I was in the States, because I was able to rent the car out and drive for Uber. And then, which wasn't our plan. Our plan was to go there, get the nonprofit going, take classes in biblical counseling, and be sharing at churches and meeting with people. But we both ended up having to work. Later got a nanny job with a great couple that was a really good fit for her. It was a huge blessing. But she really had hopes to do biblical counseling training, which she wasn't able to. So then the whole reason we moved to Portland, because there was a church there I was really stoked about. We went to that church, but nobody there was a few people that knew me because they'd seen me do a missionary presentation before, but nobody came and talked to us. No one befriended us. No one invited us to coffee or lunch or nothing. We just went to this new church. It wasn't too big, a couple hundred people. We'd just stand there feeling all awkward and, didn't know anyone in Portland. I'm from Portland, but I hadn't lived there in many years. And so, it's like going to a brand new place, and it was really difficult. So anyways, we just pushed through and we decided to go to the membership classes. I got in the membership classes, and the associate pastor was like outright blatantly rude to me. Like, whoa, it was like, whoa, where's this coming from? Like, everything I would say, he would say some kind of snide put down. And then he even said something like, we only support missionaries that are pastors we've trained, we're sending out. And it was like, okay, so this isn't going to be a fit for us. But then the odd thing was, a year later, I had a friend from Ukraine that moved to Portland, and we brought him to that church because they lived in the area, and I was trying to help him find a church. And they were given a video presentation on how they're raising money for this mission. And it wasn't a pastor, and it wasn't a pastor they were sending out. It was some kids thing. So it was like, was he just lying to me? Or was he just like, did somebody tell him I was a missionary coming to their church, and they have a, stiff arm at us? Like, are you serious? We're Christian people looking for a home. Like, we're looking for encouragement, not stiff arms. So, it's insane. Really? You find some stuff out about the people first before you do something like that. So anyway, then we left. We started looking around for another church, like seriously looking for one that fit our vision, fit our theology. Would be a good fit. And we found one pretty close to us. They were into biblical counseling, the same type that we wanted. They had a whole program there around it. They had really into missions. It wasn't a mega church technically, I don't think, but it was at least 1,000 people. Pretty big church. Met a couple friends there. It was kind of hard because some of the people weren't that friendly or welcoming. Some people that even met us were just not very nice later. I don't know why. A lot of people there were like whites, upper middle class suburbanites that shopped at JCPenney. And I don't know, they just like not, we spent about a year at that church, and we were never invited to dinner once, not one time. Nobody tried to get to know us. We volunteered ministry a couple times. We tried to plug in. We tried to talk with people. I met with junior high pastor. I tried to talk with the youth pastor. He was really standoffish. Associate pastor I made friends with, but then at some point he just completely started ignoring me. I have no idea why. The main pastor I had a few chats with, he told me he thought I had the Holy Spirit and we should talk more. I tried to set up a meeting with him before I came back to Ukraine, and he wouldn't meet. He said he was too busy. But anyway, the only church we went to try to find help, like we even went through their membership class. We went through a series of classes, and we sat down with two elders and had like over an hour conversation and explaining why we wanted to be members. And then later, we never had an answer. We never got an answer about that. And then later I came back to Ukraine and I asked about it. Didn't say nothing. Not a word. So very strange, in my opinion. Very hurtful. So, anyways, then there was, driving hundreds of miles. People would invite me to come see them, and then there would be nothing would come out of it. I once paid $500 for a booth at a Christian conference. They gave me 5 minutes to go in front of the conference and share about our ministry, but when I went up there, they shut the live stream off. I was there like sick out of my mind. I actually got walking pneumonia because I was running myself into the ground, going around trying to raise support. I had just two friends that I thought were two of my closer friends who just sat me down and were telling me I should be working more and providing for my wife. And I'm like, well, don't you see I'm driving for Uber and I fish? Like, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. And then, like, anyways, I'm in missions. This is not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do missions. It just didn't make any sense. Like, no missionary from their church. I know what church they go to and I know what missions agency. No missionary does that. And they all raise way more support than we do. Far more. Like, what are we doing wrong? Seriously? I had one friend say, I told him a couple weeks ago, this flat that we live in, we were really blessed because we came here in the middle of the conflict with Russia. We pay like $500 a month. And he's like, well, that's good. And I'm like, what do you mean that? Well, yeah, that it is. That's a huge blessing. But that's not how he meant it. It was like people have a perception missionaries are supposed to be broke. Or they're supposed to barely get by or to be cheap. Yeah, of course they're supposed to be frugal, like everyone is. Every Christian is supposed to be wise with God's money and time and their gifts and their relationships and their spiritual life and stewarding all those things. And missionaries aren't perfect. They're just Christians that go. They win. Yeah, there's certain standards we have to live by, but we don't have to be perfect and we don't have to be poor either. Like, I don't know how this mentality got into people that missionaries are supposed to be poor. I'm not saying I want to be rich. I'm not saying I need a lot. I'm very blessed with what we have. The only thing I don't like is would like to not live in a flat. I'd rather live in a house. But I give thanks to God often for all that He's given us here. So anyway, there's a lot of misconception about missions, and at the end of this video I'm going to share some of that. But anyway, so that was like our experience in the state with after I had the terrible fishing season, then I had in 10 weeks we lost half our support. Our largest giver was $500 a month, and he had to shut down his business and go to Teen Challenge, so that stopped. And then another largest supporter got into kind of a financial conundrum with a financing thing he went into, so that was like $800 right there, those two guys. And then another girl said, well, it's you or another missionary, and they chose the other missionary. Another guy said, oh, it's you or another missionary, chose the other missionary. Another guy wrote me, said, oh, we feel led to stop giving. And I was like, feel led to stop giving? Okay, what does that even mean? And then another guy said they were going to double their support. They never did. Another guy who is a pastor, or trying to be a pastor, told me that he had like a network of ATM machines. He said he was going to dedicate one to our ministry, which he didn't. So like we lost like half our support in 10 days. So the whole next year in the States was us going around just trying to get our support back up to where it was, to survival mode, to like $2,000 a month. So that was, just super discouraging because we went there with high hopes, and I was having to work full time, driving till like 5, 6 a.m. most nights for Uber. And then I was also filling out all this paperwork for a nonprofit, sending everything to our board members, building a website, getting an online giving set up, designing brochures, prayer cards, PowerPoints, a whole video that took me 4 months recording and editing and scripting and hiring people to help with that, and designing a t-shirt. I spent like hours and hours on this campaign with a t-shirt and then this cool infographic, and I had a Gospel of John, like the whole thing printed on a poster for a winner for this online campaign. I post the infographic, nobody shares it. Nobody, nothing. Some chick comes and comments, "Oh well." Like, I'm sharing all these terrible statistics about Ukraine, and that's what the only comment I get is, "Oh well." And my own, like, a few of my board members, after a lot of prodding, shared, and I was very frustrated, and I was saying how my board members don't even care. The guy my friend at the time, heard me say something about my frustration with the board members. I don't remember what it was, but he was actually one of the board members, and so he ended up leaving the board because of that. And I was like, man, look, I'm not mad at anyone. I'm a human. I put hours and hours of work into this, and nobody's helping me like make it go anywhere. And your board members, when you're on a board, you're supposed to be like excited about that thing you're on a board for. That's like why you're on the board for it. In a normal organization, board members are very proactive in promoting and stuff and raising. Actually, there's multiple people raising funds. I was doing everything, and all I was asking was, please share. That's it. That's all I was asking. So it was very, very discouraging. And then we had somebody volunteer to be our bookkeeper, and they were a professional accountant. Like a month into that, out of nowhere, she said, I need to have a conference meeting with you and your CPA. And she brings up, she's like, you shouldn't start a nonprofit just because you don't want to pay taxes. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, we're not doing this because we're doing this because we have a vision and people want to give and they want tax deductions and they're giving. I don't care about paying taxes. That's the silliest thing I ever heard. And then she's all, well, you have a puppet board, because this is my first time ever starting a nonprofit. I mean, I barely even knew what I was doing. I was just stepping out in faith. It was incredibly hard. It was a lot of work. And I just asked friends, would you be on our board? Pastors. I had a few pastors at one point in the beginning because I wanted accountability and all this. And I'm like, puppet board? Like, I'd never even heard the term. I didn't even know what it was. How am I having a puppet board? She thinks I'm just like manipulating everybody to make them make the board decisions or something. It's like, I haven't even had a board meeting yet. I had one board meeting or something. It was like, can you wait and see how our board meetings go and how things are before you start accusing me of having a puppet board and starting a nonprofit? So it was just out of nowhere. And then so she quit being our accountant. And so we've had to do it ourselves ever since. And then I was supposed to go share at her pastor's church. I spoke with him about it. He said everything was cool. We had it scheduled 6 months later, so a few weeks before I was supposed to come share, he says, oh, I forgot about it. Me and the elders can't get you in. So, when you're a missionary, you're in the States, that's your only chance you have. Your only chance. You have to use that time. You have to plan it. You have to have a calendar. And this was only one instance where people weren't thoughtful about that you were there for a short time and that was it. So I'm not saying that to like attack anybody. I'm just saying, like, if me or another missionary comes to the States, you should be aware that they have to use that time well while they're there. They can't just reschedule things. So that was, it was very, very hard time in the States. And then we decided we would come back to Ukraine. And a lot of that decision had to do with, it was just very hard for Lera to be there. We weren't really making friends there. One thing after another was discouraging. My My buddy called me out of the blue and said he had an opportunity for me to go fishing, do some long lining. That ended up being a good opportunity, so I did that. But I had gone to the hospital twice, once for acid reflux and once for the pneumonia thing. I coughed so much that I tore muscle fibers in my back. I had to go into the ER because it was so painful. And then we had car troubles because I was driving so much. And then moving with the visa and the bad fishing thing and everything, and then losing half our support. Everything was terrible. I mean, as far as money goes, and we ended up we had like 60 grand in debt. So that was I could handle that. I knew, that eventually we would get out of it, but it was so much weighing on Leda that we just we prayed about it and decided that somehow I came across a friend who was filing bankruptcy, and so that kind of planted the seed in my mind. It wasn't something we planned. It just kind of came out of nowhere. So we called an attorney and we started thinking about it, and it was definitely doable. So we thought, well, we can just get a fresh start and go back to Ukraine, because everything there was just a disaster. It was so hard. We had literally dozens and dozens of people tell me to my face they want to support us. People tell me they want to come on short-term missions trip. Several people. I haven't heard from any of them. We've had a few people come, which is awesome, but we've had no communication along those lines. So our whole big vision was completely obliterated. Nobody wants to come here on missions. Nobody wants to join our team. Churches want to send a team to help us. It's just like taking the crumbs we can get, like a person here, a person there. Whatever we can get, we're trying to work with other Christians or missionaries in Ukraine or in the area. It's just been super hard, and after a while, it just gets like you get jaded. So the missionaries here are all kind of in their own bubbles. So for some reason, Ukraine seems to be like a place where weird missionaries go. That's a blanket statement. It's not true. If you're listening to this, I'm not talking about you, but anyway, there are just a lot of weird people that come here, or the people that aren't weird, maybe their theology is different than yours, so they don't want to work with you. And I'm trying to say we should be working together if we both believe in the gospel. I don't want to work with a church that doesn't teach the gospel, but yeah, we have disagreements. Let's work together to reach the city. That's been what I was taught to do, what I've tried to do the whole time, but there's a little bit of that happening here, but it's really weak. And so they're all doing their own thing, and then the people in the church and the culture, it's like nobody wants to really do ministry or read their Bible or is excited about growing in God. There is some of that, but it's mostly like pulling teeth to get people to want to do things, or to get people to read their Bible, or to consider, serving God with their life, like full time or something. It's very, very difficult here. So that's all that the experience in the States, our experience here as missionaries, the stuff with financial support. We had 3 churches when we were first missionaries in Ukraine for our first 5 years that were following us. And I was so excited about going back to the States and hoping to partner with them. All 3 of them said no, like they didn't want to be a part of our ministry. Like, okay, so we've been back. We've been doing the best we can with what we have. New stuff is basically Leda's been for almost a year working with a worship team to get ready for a church plant. It's a Sunday evening church plant that starts this Sunday night. There was a young man from seminary a couple of years back came to our church, and now he's almost done with seminary. So he's like a pastor in training. And then our pastor, myself, and another missionary, Bob, will be the 4 speakers at the church. It'll be in English and Russian, and it's aimed at young people. So Leda's been practicing worship songs all year to get ready for that. We don't have enough Christians that play instruments, so they have a couple people that are unbelievers that play in the band, which of course is not ideal, but it's what we've gone with for now. And so that starts this Sunday. Lyd has been going for a year to biblical counseling, and that's been, she loves it. She's learning a lot. It's changing her life. She has 2 years left, so every 3 months she goes for a 1-week module up in Kiev, and they give her a load of homework, and then she counsels a couple of friends going through the material. And she took the initiative recently to invite people that were alumni and current students to gather at our flat and practice biblical counseling. And there's a couple of ladies that are really experienced and good, so they found that to be very helpful. And then our English club was supposed to start in September, back up with the school semester how we always do, but our few other missionary friends are going to be out of town at a retreat. So we have to wait till October before we start that, and we're going to go out to universities and hand out invitations to the English club. It's not like it was before when we would get 80 to 120 people. We get 40 to 60 people, maybe a few more. And that, I think, is because more and more speaking clubs have sprouted up all over the city. So you have a lot. Back in the day, it was like a lot of just a few good Christian English clubs in different places in the city, but now it's like they're everywhere. Most of them are secular. So I don't know if they're trying to compete with the Christians or something, but that makes it harder to get as many people into your English club. But we'll get out some invitations, and I think that will help a lot. The discouraging thing is we do our English club right in this historical church building. Some people would never step foot inside that church, but they do for the English club. And we've seen literally thousands of faces come through there over the years we've been doing it, and so few, a little percentage come to the camp, and then so few of them, 1 or 2 a year, maybe 3 will start going to church, and then eventually maybe 1 or 2 of those will become a member. So it's a very, very patient ministry. You do a lot for a little bit of fruit, but of course, there's no telling what other seeds are being planted. We don't know. We're just trying to be faithful. So, if you've been following my updates, you know that I started a book in January of 2019 on Bitcoin. I started studying about Bitcoin. That led me to learning about banking, the history of money, the history of central banks, government corruption, bubbles, booms, and busts, crony capitalism, Austrian economics, the technology behind Bitcoin, how to research cryptocurrencies, how to trade, all this stuff. I mean, I really found it fascinating. And I kept doing English club, and I kept doing apologetics on Sunday night, but I set aside some ministry to write a book because I found it to be revolutionary at people's best non-violent chance of fighting the corruption of our government. Personally, Bitcoin's not my favorite. It's only a good coin because of its network effects, which matter a lot. You want to go with what has network effects, but there's a lot of non-truths being memed by people who have a lot of Bitcoin. So you got to be careful with who you're listening to. I personally like a project called Grin a lot. I like Cardano, I like Monero, I like Bitcoin. And then some other projects, but I'm not going to mention them. They're very high-risk projects. So, in 2017, fall of 2017, I went back fishing again. I made some good money, over 50 grand, and I was able to I took about 15 and put it into cryptocurrency. And that didn't go as we hoped, but some of it's still sitting there. And we're waiting on that. But the book is going to be really good. It's basically written. I have a co-author with a big social media platform. One or two guys. One's already written a foreword. Another guy I'm talking to about a foreword. They're both way more influential than me. Because nobody in crypto knows who I am. But with these 3 people name on my book, it should really help a lot. So I'm also planning to write another book this year that is about stewarding the resources God's given us to optimize His glory. I think I'm going to call it something like the Christian life, a blueprint or a blueprint for the Christian life or something like that. And it's basically about the idea that people and time are wealth, and the money and our other resources, like our relationships, our gifts and stuff, are just tools to help us invest in the kingdom, and how, like, practical ways to manage those things. How to find your calling, stuff like that. I want to write a book because I think there's a lot of treasure in those concepts that I have to share. I've thought about these things for years. I've been planning this book in my mind for years. So I'm gonna write it, and when we're planning to come to the States. It'll be either me or me and Lera in the spring of 2020. So a year from this coming spring, we'll have been missionaries for 10 years. So I thought that would be the perfect time to go try to do a little tour, share about our ministry, hopefully meet some new people. Who knows what God will do. The whole vision of a gospel-centered rec center, it's still on the table. I mean, I've kind of given it up. I'm not really, I tried so hard for so long to pitch that, to get people excited about it, but nobody cares about that really. The people, I'm not saying the people that support us and pray for us don't care about us. They care about us, and maybe they care about that, but nobody cares enough to give it $1 or $2 million. And we need like one. I mean, actually, we don't need $1 or $2 million to do it. That would be, of course, ideal for a rec center, but then you'd need like $100,000 a month or something to maintain it. And if I had that kind of money, we'd be hiring grant writers and an executive director, full-time fundraisers, one or two of them. So anyways, I have the vision. I know what to do with the money if we get it. But if we even had, like, for example, if all our supporters over the years had stayed with us right now, we've been getting lately like $1,400 to $1,800 a month. So we're barely scraping by. It's been tough. But I am just exhausted with raising support after everything we've been through. So I try to avoid it. I'm trying to get other things going. We started a peanut butter business, but my partner, he was selling it at outdoor markets. But that he would usually sell out all of what he had. But we both think it's better to go with distribution. My good friend has connections to a couple store chains here, so we're waiting for some paperwork, and we're going to try to go with massive distribution instead of just selling it at outdoor markets. So we basically haven't even got our original money back that we invested in that peanut butter business. So we're waiting on the paperwork. So I have the book project, the peanut butter, writing the other book for when we come to the States. And now I've been praying about, okay, I want to get back to more discipleship, I was teaching theology for a while at this small Christian university, but they changed their leadership and they kind of fizzled apart. So I'm not doing that anymore. And so I had this idea. Over the years, I've been really developing my skills with Photoshop and video editing and writing as well. So I thought, wow, what if I took a book, read it, paraphrased it, made an animated video teaching it. And at the same time, I want to do these 1-minute devotional videos, but do it in Russian. So I'll write it in English, 1 minute. That's 4 sentences of 2 2/3 lines in Calibri .12 font. And then I'll translate it into Russian, do the voiceover, animate it, put English subtitles, and try to do one a day. So then I'll be discipling, I'll be sharing with our supporters, and I'll be, hopefully maybe growing some followers and working on my Russian all at the same time. Because in the past I was meeting with guys one-on-one, doing inductive Bible study, and I had a list of 7 guys, and every week I'd get 4 or 5 to come because a few always can't make it for whatever reason. And well, it was just, they weren't really into inductive Bible study. They'd come because they were my friend and wanted to practice English, or maybe they did want to read the Bible, but most people aren't into inductive Bible study. So I just thought, okay, if I do something online, I can potentially reach a lot more people if I'm teaching that way. So I think that's what I'm going to try. and we'll see how it goes. We'll try something new. Of course, we'll continue with the English Club and the Sunday Night Church and the other ministry that Leota's doing as well. So, that was a long update. Like I told you, it was going to be a different one. Now, before I go real quick, I have 10 things here I want to share just to encourage people. And these are things I've learned about missions that some of them I don't think people are really aware of. And the first one is when missionaries are in the States, they don't need financial support less, they need it more. Travel in the United States is expensive, and it's usually more expensive than on the mission field. Not in every case, but most cases. So there's this weird idea that we come to the States that now we don't need supports. Like I said, in 10 days we lost half our support, and it was like that's when we actually need it the most. So like the trips back to the States are not like a vacation. Missionaries, at least they shouldn't be just, traveling around, living the high life on support or something. Like there should be a serious mission and work and building relationships and doing outreach or teaching or preparing or learning, praying, all that stuff. And like going to the States, many missionaries do it every 2 years. We've done it a couple times in 8 years. Almost 9. So, I heard one guy say once that there was a Campus Crusade girl back in the States off the mission field, and she wasn't working, so they stopped supporting her. And they said it like they were doing the honorable thing, like this girl should be working, she's back in the States. Well, any book you read about raising missionary support says this is a full-time job. Like it is. It's not only takes all your time to be calling people, writing things, following up, keeping track of it all. It's a full-time job just keeping track of all the correspondence. Then you have all the emotional taxation. It's very, very hard to be calling people, visiting people, hearing no's, and a yes. You can't come back off the mission field, work a full-time job, and do that. It's just not humanly possible. So please don't think that's what missionaries should be doing. Do they go on the mission field and put all this time into developing those skills, then go home, find a job, and then stop the job and go back to the mission field? Like, it's very inefficient. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean people don't want to work. It means they're trying to be missionaries. So either support them or don't. And if the missionaries are in the States, they still need the support. So the missionaries aren't there to work. I think it would be better to be thinking about how you can help them get back onto the mission field ASAP, to be ministered to and encouraged while home, and sent back with hopefully more than they came with. One friend of mine had me come speak at his church, and the day I was going to go speak, he said, "Don't ask anyone for money." So I didn't, but it's like, why not? Why do you think I'm here? Like, what is wrong with that? I mean, I guess pastors have to be careful about asking their congregants for money too much, but that's what pastors should be discipling their people to understand. Like, giving is part of the Christian life. It's part of worship, and there's nothing wrong with asking. It's like you're giving people an opportunity to sow into the kingdom of God. Plus, that's the whole reason we're there. We need financial support. Not because we're in love with money, but because it's a tool to build God's kingdom. So number 3 is please stop thinking missionaries need to be broke or barely getting by. Why should we not want them to have plenty? Like I said, they don't have to be lavish. They don't have to have a bunch of nice stuff. But so all the people back home, they can have nice stuff. But missionaries are supposed to be broke. No, that's not how it works. I mean, yeah, in the real world, in the secular world, in capitalistic world, that's how it works. But this is the church. It's not your money. You might not like me saying that, but it's not your money. You worked for it, you got the skills, you got the job, and then there's also missionaries. And you're not obligated to give to any missionary. You're not obligated to give to me. But if you want to please God, and if you want to invest in your own eternal best, then you should be giving, and you should be giving a lot. You should be giving sacrificially. And I believe a few times, had people stop giving because they were going on to the mission field, and I've never understood that either. I give to other missionaries. Giving there should be this going out from you. And because we're missionaries, or we're a church, or we're a pastor, churches should tithe. Churches collect a tithe, and when that church has that money, they should tithe. And it doesn't have to be missions, but it's got to be to something. Like, this giving thing has to be happening. It doesn't stop. There's no place where it stops. It's always coming and going out. It's not about the money. It's not about the amount. It's about keeping our hearts right and worshipful. So that's what I believe with all my heart. And missionaries, you should be giving to other missionaries, and churches too. Everyone should be giving. So, number 4, stop thinking missionaries aren't supposed to ask for money. I don't know how many people, when I first became a missionary, tell me, where does the Bible say to ask for money? I mean, I wrote a whole blog on the thing. Like, it's all over the place. Paul was a tent maker, then he received the gift from the Macedonians, then he went to preaching full time. He was a tent maker out of necessity to survive, but his time was much better spent teaching the word, and when he had the resources to do so, he did it. And he praised the Macedonians for their generosity. That is how the gospel should be going forth. And now, some people say, oh, you're not a missionary, you're not sent out from my church, I'm not supporting you, you're not in my denomination. Cool, that's fine. But we're a parachurch thing, and not everyone believes in that, but I believe in that. I believe that in certain countries it's a must for outreach. Parachurch is a must in some countries. One guy told me, oh, you just met a girl in Ukraine and decided to declare yourself a missionary. Oh, all right. Thanks for being so, like, how do people say this stuff? Like, it's a good thing God has his help figuring out people's motives and callings on their life. Like, I can't imagine somebody saying something like that. And that guy was training to be a pastor and founding a seminary or something. And it's like, wow. So anyways, there's a lot you can read in the Bible about asking for money and about giving and about missions. And it's okay. It's actually a good thing. And people's attitude says a lot. I've seen a lot of attitudes get weird when you ask people for financial support. It's terrible. Like, people get really weird, act really different when it comes to money. So I don't know. Number 5, it's probably good to deny yourself some things and diversify your giving among other missionaries. You'll have more blessing in heaven. So yeah, choose some missionaries who really believe in what they're doing. They don't have to be perfect. They're not gonna be perfect. And be faithful. Be faithful to pray for them. Once in a while, write them a note. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be 1 or 2, 3 sentences. Missionaries, it can mean the world to one if you just write them out of the blue and say you're thinking about them. And I suggest diversification and consistency. Find a few missionaries, 3, 4, 5, more if you have more money, and support them until they're done. That's what the missionaries need. God's not schizophrenic, like give here 1 month and give there another month, or, just consistently support some people. Then I would say, number 6, choose a few missionaries who believe will steward their time, money, and the gospel well. There's a lot of missionaries out there who are living more like expats than missionaries. I won't name any names, but be faithful to them in your support. This goes along with what I was just saying. When you support people for life, it makes all the difference. I believe this is being led by the Spirit as opposed to feelings that fluctuate. The way some people are led by the Spirit turns God into a very indecisive person. God's not indecisive. He's not schizophrenic. He has a mission. He has a strategy. He has a plan. He's faithful. So, once in a while, respond to missionaries' emails or take the initiative to check in on them, ask how they are. It can just be 2 or 3 sentences. That's number 7. Number 8, it's nice if instead of unsubscribing from their emails that you'd rather just let them keep coming, but just delete them. If you don't want to read them, just delete them. Short, thoughtful correspondence is great, but don't expect a missionary to be able to keep up on everything happening in your life in order for you to support them. It'd be nice if they can, but it's unrealistic for them to do that for dozens or even hundreds of supporters. So, yeah, a lot of people support a missionary because they like them, they know them, they're their friend, it's a personal thing. It's not necessarily a strategic gospel thing. It's either feeling or friend. But it should be a strategic gospel thing. Should be, you don't need to see pictures of starving people to give money. You should know these people know the gospel, will disciple people in the gospel. That's where your money goes. You shouldn't give to hunger things if there's no gospel going on. I knew somebody started a ministry to build aquaponics in villages where people had no money and were forced to sell their daughters into sex slavery. And I said, well, are they sharing the gospel? And they're like, no. And it was founded by a Christian. I'm like, okay, this is founded by a Christian, but there's no plan to share the gospel. It's very weird. What are we doing if we're not sharing the gospel? So, like, find the places that are sharing the gospel. Give to those things, and don't expect from the missionaries to be able to be your best friend. I want to keep up on people, and sometimes in my updates I ask people, please let me know what's going on in your life or how we can pray for you. Nobody ever answers, but I do ask and I do mean it. But it's just impossible when you have literally dozens of people. We have 70-something supporters. Like, some people have hundreds of supporters. Like, how can you possibly maintain that many friendships? It's just not fair. It's not realistic. It's not the way it works. So don't expect that from missionaries to be able to keep up all the time, even though I'm sure there's some really great missionaries that can. But when you're doing missions, you have a family here, you're thinking about building relationships here, and constantly your support, having to keep people updated, raise support. That's a lot to juggle. And then when you have to build a relationship with each individual person just so you don't lose their support. I mean, I've bent over backwards trying to do that. I was sending people thank yous, sending people small gifts from Ukraine. I was trying to do everything right I could. And then we get back to the States and like half our support is gone in a few days. So, I don't know. I think God is just teaching us something there. Number 9, it's missionaries are imperfect people, and that's okay. You're not going to agree with everything the missionary says or does. And if you're giving them your money, you should know that's just the way it is. There's not a single missionary who you're going to give your money to who's going to go out and do everything the way you would, or you're going to agree with everything they do. And if there is a missionary who seems to be doing everything right, it's just that they have a really good filter. It's just that you don't know everything they're choosing to do, or every way they're using the money, or every way they're using their time, or all their mission strategies, or all their theology. There's going to be stuff where if you found out, you'd rather not give them money. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying people are people. Missionaries are imperfect. And know that you're going to disagree with some of their choices. And just pray for them. Or the loving thing would be not to just cut them off or tell them discontinue support, would be to try to talk with them and hear their side of it, hear them out, and explain your side of it, and find out why they made the choices they did. That would actually be excellent, mature thing to do, or the caring, thoughtful thing. Number 10, take a Kairos course or a perspectives course to get a good grasp on God's heart for the nations, missions, and how all this stuff works, you won't regret it. Those courses are for everyone. I really think every pastor should have their members go through those because they're just awesome. And they really help me see God's global strategy and how central it is to the biblical narrative. So that's it. I don't know how long this went. I know it was very much too long. But please pray for us. Please, if you have any, if you could, any words. If you have any kind of encouragement or wisdom or insight, or I'm sure there's some rebuke. I'm not really that open to hearing rebuke right now, but I could try. That's my update. God bless you. Thank you so much for all of those who are praying for us and who are following the ministry. We appreciate you. And we'll be in touch.